What's up, YouTube? So my Google Fi SIM arrived this morning. I've just installed it on my iPhone, and I'm gonna tell you all about it. All right, so the easiest stuff. Google Fi is $20 a month. That's unlimited calls and unlimited text if you're in the US. It's $10 for every 1 gig of data, and you only pay for the data that you use, up to $60. So here's the thing. If you use 6 gigs of data, which means $60, you don't get billed for your extra data after that. So your whole plan will cap at $80. They do have a cap at 15 gigs of data in a month, but that's a lot of data. Now, did it work on iPhone? It worked perfectly. Google Fi was only supported on certain phones up until November 2018, but they just opened it to iPhone. I installed it on my iPhone 10, and it worked without any trouble. How does this compare to an AT&T or a T-Mobile plan? Well, here's a chart that I just came up with on the prices today as of January 2019. You know, there are a lot of variables here. If you're in a family plan, then you might get a better deal. That really depends on how much data you use. But what I really want to talk about is roaming. Now, the really magical thing about Google Fi is that you can roam in over 170 countries at no extra cost. It's actually quicker and easier just to list the countries where Google Fi is not supported. So I'm just gonna write those over here. And if you're not traveling to any of those countries, you can just rely on Google Fi. Now, there's a real argument here, if you travel a lot, that you should switch to Fi, and it might be a better option for you. So I'll tell you a little bit of my thought process on this. I currently live in Costa Rica, and I'm actually considering switching to Google Fi permanently, like replacing my local carrier for this, but I'll get into that in a second. But even if you live in the US and you have to travel maybe 3 or 4 times a year abroad, there's a really good case to Google Fi being a cheaper and more efficient option. Let me give you an example. Say you live in the US and you have a SIM card that's $50 a month, and you travel maybe 3 or 4 times a year. When you're traveling abroad, depending on the country, say that you purchase a new SIM just for that occasion. That price may vary a lot. So if you fly to Costa Rica, for example, you can get a plan for maybe $25, $30 for the full month. That's obviously very reasonable. But for example, in Japan, there's no cheap alternative. Actually, the best alternative is to buy these little Wi-Fi boxes. So that was 7,000 yen, which makes up to around $70. That gave me unlimited Wi-Fi wherever I was. Obviously no phone service, but you can get along with Wi-Fi. So let's land on an average of $50 for every country you visit to get a SIM and just be connected on your trip. So you're spending $60 per month on the US, that's $600 plus tax. And then maybe $150, say $200 extra for 3 or 4 trips a year. So that comes up to $800. Now, $800 divided by 12 months, that's $66, which could be enough to get your basic Google plan for 20, 4 gigs of data for 40, that's 60, and then you still have some extra spare change for calls. Now, there's a catch here. If you're abroad, your phone calls may cost you money. Phone calls abroad, either receiving calls or making calls, if you're outside the US, they're 20 cents per minute, which, yeah, it's expensive. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is that on iPhone, we are limited on a feature called Wi-Fi calls. If you're on Wi-Fi, Google will automatically route your call over that Wi-Fi, and then you don't have to pay extra for that call. That's something that iPhone does not support, but if you're in a supported Android phone, then you're fine, and then you don't have to worry about these extra charges. But do we really call that much? I don't know. Like in my case, most of the calls I make are to my family or my close friends, and I usually call them over FaceTime or WhatsApp. So I don't really have to make like old school, traditional calls. So there's a case, depending on your travel habits, to actually use Google Fi. And you have all the advantages of having obviously the same phone number, not having to switch SIMs when you fly. Now, digging even deeper, there's even a case for you ditching your local carrier. And that will depend a lot on the country, but I've actually done this math. In Costa Rica, it's $25 a month for a full-on local plan, which is actually very cheap if you compare that to Europe, for example. So you'll have to balance that out. And you also need to balance your local calls. With Google Fi, you'll be paying extra for every local or international call you make or receive. But again, I know that $25 is a very cheap plan. Compare that to world rates. So for $50 a month, I think there's a much better case towards Google Fi. So breaking down the pros of Google Fi, you have the same number everywhere you go. That's a US number, which has certain advantages. Chances are your bank is calling you and spamming you and sending you text messages and robocalls. So, for me, getting a whole new number that's from another country will save me a lot of trouble in these unexpected calls. Most of my calls are business calls, and in that case, people won't mind dialing international. It's actually, again, a filter for the type of calls you want to make, I guess. But if you're you're talking to family and friends, you probably have their WhatsApp or their FaceTime ID, and then you can just call them using those apps. Now, the cons of living abroad and switching to Google Fi is that anybody calling you will need to dial international, positive or negative, depending on what you feel. Now, one big disadvantage with many local carriers is that they have dangerous roaming options. So my local carrier, for example, lets you do roaming in all of the Americas. But if you spend all your data, then you will go into regular roaming numbers. Or for example, if you travel to another country and you connect to the wrong carrier, the one with which they don't have a partnership, you'll be charged at normal roaming fees, which are crazy high. You can easily go hundreds of dollars if you're not careful. Where with Google Fi, you're sort of protected and you know that you're never going to spend over 80. Even an hour of speaking on the phone abroad is going to be only $12. So again, I'm very new to Fi. I haven't decided if I'm ditching my local carrier, but overall the experience has been great. Speed connection is fantastic. I have signal everywhere because Google Fi switches from carrier depending on where the signal or the internet connection is stronger. But if you have more experience with Fi and you have been using it for a while, please let me know in the comments on how that roaming is working for you. If you like my content, subscribe. I'll see you next week.